Okay, guys, I think we are at time now. So let's go ahead and begin. I appreciate everybody joining us today. Good afternoon, good evening. It seems like there's a lot of people from kind of all over the globe here. So we're happy to have you. Let's go ahead and kind of just do some light housekeeping. Go ahead, submit questions. Due to time constraints, we'll try to answer them all. If we're not able to, what we will do is get you guys all of the answers to your questions in a post-call document. The call recording will also be available after the call sometime. So we'll jump into today's agenda. We're not going to spend time, right, on risk management 102, kind of those market level insights. We're going to have a much needed discussion led by some of the industry's top talent here around identify and signal from noise. So now more than ever, this topic of kind of third party risk, right, is important to begin to unpack. Inherent risk grows greater, of course, with the expanding third-party reliance. We know this. Third-party risk and exposure is also a known and continuously growing cost center for organizations. So, how can we be most effective, right, in our jobs? And so across industries, really, those high costs and kind of limited scale really characterize our third-party risk and management programs. And so as a result, many have languished, even though the need for them has really grown. So most risk programs primarily limited to only new vendors because of staffing constraints, maybe backlogs, things like that, which make us more threat focused. And the objective here is to be more risk focused, which the needle needs to move that way so that we can really prevent attempts instead of, just fighting attacks. And so for everybody wondering, it seems like there's a bunch of people on. We are going to cover the SolarWinds Trojan, so do stay tuned. And without further ado, we have two of the most really, I would say, transformative minds in cybersecurity for you here today. So we'll let them get to it. Liran?
Thank you, Alana, and happy to be here, guys. Happy to be part of this webinar. So my name is Liran Sorani, and I'm the head of Cyber Business Unit here at Webos. I have over 10 years of experience in cyber intelligence. I designed and deployed dozens of solutions across the world. Here at Webos, we focus on data collection, massive data collection. We actually have two main domain expertise. Both are provided as data feeds. The first deals mainly with open web sources, news, blogs, and discussions, mainly for AI and brand monitoring. And the second is around cyber data, and it's providing enriched and structured data, either as raw data with one endpoint or DBD data breach detection as another point.
And I'm Aaron Barr, happy to be part of this conversation for sure. I'm the CTO and co-founder of PyQ Media. I as well have a lot of experience developing solutions across information operations, intelligence solutions, mostly inside the intelligence community about the last 8 years working on the private sector. PyQ Media focuses on intelligence and risk analytics of open source data and how that affects individuals and corporations. And with that, let's get started.
Oh yeah. So taking into account the risk management process and looking on the holistic approach, it starts with a wide set of sources or feeds. It could be an open web, social media, or dark and deep web data. I will explain now the basic concept of dark web data collection, which will be the first layer, as you can see here in the top diagram. So it's always start with the discovery, actually the source mapping. In general, doing it in the dark web, it's a bit tough, challenging. There is no Google. Try to imagine, for example, Telegram network with more than 500 million messages every day. Try to find among the tens of millions of channels the relevant ones. It's a very complicated work. Try to enter one of the deepest or most dark forums, which includes mainly Russian hackers. It's very, very challenging. So we need to do that. Some of it is done automatically, some of it is done manually, but this is our job. Once you have this part of the discovery, you should go to the next stage, which is the crawling. The crawling should be stable continuously and include all the relevant sections. Otherwise, you might miss data. This is a very complicated work. Why? Because in most of the cases, the admin wants to kick you out. They block the IP, they close the session is expired, they have an anti-bot behavior analysis in order to find all the relevant bots. So it's pretty complicated. In most of the cases, if you can overcome most of them, like CAPTCHA, etc., then it works okay. The next part, in order to truly make the data effective, you need to take it into a more a standard format. You need to make it structured. As you can imagine, if you'll take a thread, then you have the author, you have the text, you have the title, and more metadata. You also need to extract the relevant entities because they are very important for cyber intelligence, entities like an IP or domain or the URLs that were mentioned, Bitcoin address, and more and more and more. The last part is to make it unified, so eventually it can be plugged in into different intelligence solutions, like in the case of Risk HQ.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Liran. A more comprehensive and deep data source approach requires an integration and visualization capability that allows for users to interact with that data and develop automation of pattern analytics, risk factor identification, and monitoring to make it useful for the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when we're talking about the state of third-party cyber risk, we all kind of have an understanding of what these issues are that are displayed on the screen. We have too narrow data sets, too few examples or samples over time. Deeper assessments are costly and time-consuming. We need to take into account not just the IT system security and the application of policies, but also data on company reputation, sentiment, vulnerabilities, and compromised PII across corporate and employees. Employees we're going to talk about a lot because all of these factors affect risk, and it's a continuous cycle. This is why PyQ and WebHose, we've come together to have this discussion, to partner together to combine larger data sets into continuous visualization platform that allows analysts to better understand the relationships and artifacts of corporate risk.
So I totally agree with you, Aaron. I think that to make a data stream more actionable, it means by design to focus only on relevant indicators or potential incidents, taking into account that criminals are dynamic and smart. They change names, identities, and networks. Only with a wide coverage of networks that includes anonymous platforms like Tor, I2P, and ZeroNet, chat applications like Telegram or Discord or IRC even, and deep and dark sources with the ability to search across, one can really get relevant and high quality feeds. Let's take the SolarWinds example with the Orion IT platform. This is part of a supply chain attack that was already being patched with malwares months ago. The mentions were already in the dark networks, whether it was zero-day vulnerabilities or other discussions earlier that could have helped to avoid or minimize the issue.
And of course, these risks are multi-sourced across all the layers of the web, from open to dark web, across corporate employee digital artifacts. And as we mentioned, all these artifacts contribute to organizational risk. An entrance point, it could be highly targeted on an individual, a system. It could be opportunistic. It could be focused on a product or a program or the entire corporation, right? These are the variances with inside risk and attacks. Looking at these pattern changes across risk factors such as news, sentiment, social, exposed PII, and then being able to drill into discrete exposures, as Liran was talking about, compromised PII, individual breaches, compromised systems. This is what provides more actionable intelligence on organizational risk.
You know, Aaron, looking on a wide angle, we can clearly see behavioral patterns, or at least correlation, between an open web event and dark and deep web signals. For example, a new vulnerability that was reported as a CV, and you can find many of those publicly available, can trigger intensive discussions across different hacking forums or Telegram channels. Who is keeping an eye on this to verify that another attack is not planned? Question mark. But in order to connect the dots and get into a meaningful findings, the data should be connected into a risk management solution that aggregate, analyze, and then unify the risk into a clear event.
Yeah, and it can't be overstated the importance that people, not just systems, play in contributing to organizational risk, especially today. I mean, the last 9 months, remote working, social media activities, digital connectivity, they all further complicate an organization's ability to monitor and mitigate human layer vulnerabilities and compromises. Here we conducted a Fortune 100 study of top executives across the top companies, and some of the statistics here are represented, and we can see, right, some of these are quite significant. Business emails attached to social media accounts, 23% of top executives. And if these statistics are true for the Fortune 100 companies, imagine how it exists for the rest of us.
You know, as a data vendor that monitors thousands of sources and dozens of networks, I can clearly say nobody is safe anymore. We can see every day thousands of mentions on brands related to data breaches, PII and NPI. Threats in the form of new malwares, ransomwares are being traded among criminal groups. And as an example, let's take Apple. Over the last year in Webos, we detected something like 160,000 posts in forum, marketplace, and chat offering Apple products being sold illegally. In the case of Amazon, over the last year, we detected more than 500,000 posts selling services, tutorials, and method to purchase Amazon accounts with balance or credits. Amazon gift cards are, very popular in the dark web, or tutorials teaching how to buy products on Amazon with a stolen credit card. I can say that Webos detects more than 1,000 mentions of the brand Amazon and its services every day. 1,000 every day. In Disney, we saw a similar phenomena. We saw a trend in the last year with thousands of compromised accounts in Disney Plus, for example. You can reach out to different technological newspapers like ZDNet to see that accounts can range between $3 and $11. So there is a high incentive to sell it. It's all about money eventually.
And of course, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about, what's on everybody's tongue today, related to SolarWinds. Here's a third party, a perfect example of a company that has expansive penetration across companies, commercial companies, across government organizations, not a large company, 2,700 employees. And here are just some statistics, some information that cover, again, we don't yet know, all the details aren't out. And of course, we can always say, let he who has not sinned cast the first stone. We're all vulnerable. We're all exposable. This is just an example of where one company's exposures can affect many. And of course, it's important to state too, since so much is being tied to this particular attack as being a nation state or sophisticated attack. Sophisticated nation state adversaries, as it states here, right? They're not all using attack type TTPs that are in the movies, right? They use commonly accessible vulnerabilities and attack vectors, especially as the first point of entry, typically. And here's a visualization of what some of that data looks like in the Risk HQ platform, and the ability to look, as we were talking about, across different risk factors, whether it be the ability to look at news patterns across timelines, across geography, being able to see the example of risk factors below. This is just a screenshot, of course, one example, being able to look at open and dark web patterns across these different modes. And then also below, being able to look at the individuals. Of course, we've covered the names of the individuals, but being able to look at individual risks and critical issues related to those individuals. This is a sensitive topic, and I think it's one that PyQ has focused on, WebHost is focused on, because it is such a critical vulnerability for organizations. It needs to be covered, but of course it needs to be covered with some sensitivity related to the individuals involved.
Yeah, I must tell you that as a simple user behind it, it looks very straightforward. I mean, you see just SolarWinds as a dashboard and that's it. You get all the alerts, but we should notify that actually behind the scenes there is a lot of complexity. Okay, we try to create a different bank of words under the entities or the organization in order to make the monitoring and eventually the events that the risk management provide more holistic. So I will start by overviewing a few examples, and of course we'll return back to the SolarWinds here. The following example is an exploit to the SolarWinds MSP PME. It sounds like Chinese maybe, but the MSP is managed service provider, and the PME it's actually the patch management engine. This is actually part of the core solution of SolarWinds. The exploit describes in this example allows the executor to execute code on the service. And I must say, frankly, that it's very, very similar to what actually was reported on the news about Orion IT, which is the basic software that SolarWinds sells to organizations. Imagine the impact. I mean, it's like taking the basic foundation of your third party, which you trust, that eventually being hacked, and it's being deployed over all your organizations. According to public news, it seems like more than 30,000 customers were impacted. Each one of them is organization like the Pentagon, like the US Army, etc. It's huge. In this example, you can see PACE that presents known malicious IOCs, which is indicator of compromise hashes from the Orion attack. Those hashes might lead to actors related to the malware or just add more technical information about that after the attack has occurred. So actually here, we are talking on the post event, where a risk management solution can detect additional indicators to the more specific attack or method that can help to block or minimize the impact on the end user.
And Liran, this is a great example of being able to take, as you mentioned, post-attack, discrete compromise artifacts, and then be able to put these back into new searches for patterns that might come around networks, individuals involved in the exposures of this particular types of information, right? I mean, tools cannot replace an experienced analyst, but they can significantly aid an analyst's ability to identify patterns and drive through these critical risk artifacts.
Absolutely.
And I think it's important to talk about corporate risk isn't just about IT security risks or risk to compromise. Business and reputation risk can be just as critical to an organization, such as this example where the Apple iPhone 12 was being made available for pre-orders in the dark web prior to its release.
Yeah, so as you said, in this example, we can see another point of risk, the business aspect. The post actually was published on already 16th of September, a month before the official launch of the iPhone 12. Moreover, correlating data from multiple sources or channels can put the risk in the right context and in the right time. you can see in this example that the vendor is selling the so-called iPhone 12 in half or even less the price. It might be a fake, it can be damaged. It's a very huge impact on the brand and reputation. Imagine if it will be even a mass event of selling such kind of devices. So monitoring such events should be wide. And as you can see, the vendor is selling in multiple channels. He already published it in a forum and also refers to his Telegram channel or address. So collecting these signals in time and converting them into a risk by identifying a pattern is super effective and can be done using risk management solutions.
And here's that data presented with Inside Risk HQ, where we see in the open and dark web the visualization on the 16th of that particular post being made. As we've talked about before too, we can then take the particular markers out of this post, whether it's a Telegram user ID, whether it's a particular phrase or set of keywords, in this case pre-order, where we're looking for data across the dark web related to, could just be iPhone 12 Pro, and be able to put those through the system and be able to see the patterns of discussion. Here, of course, we see one post and then a large lull in conversation before people start talking about pre-orders again just prior and post the release of the iPhone 12. So being able to visualize this across these different modes, geographically in the time graph, being able to see the raw data is very important to be able to visualize this data.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So in this example, the vulnerability being exposed belonged to a tour operator. We will not disclose the exact names, but it's pretty huge, where its digital assets are being compromised and presented for sale. The operator provides services to top tourist vendors in Brazil, which necessarily means that dozens of organizations were compromised. The vulnerability, which is an RCE, it's a remote code executions. It allows a person to one of the most dangerous types of computer vulnerabilities. It allows an attacker a direct channel to the target server, and practically he can do whatever he wants, like running a malicious code within the target system, delete files, copy files, and more. The following actor offers actually a macro exploit tutorial for Word and Excel. You know, Microsoft Office, I don't need to say much, everybody knows who is Office, is being deployed on thousands of organizations. Many of them are governmental. Imagine the damage and the chaos it might lead into. In this example, it's actually doxing. Doxing is actually an act of publication of private or identifying information about an individual or organization. The example show specific CEO details that are being leaked in Doxpin, one of the sites that are being used for doxing. It includes email addresses, private and the public one, his current home address, phone numbers, and more and more and more. So, of course, in most of the cases, doxing is usually being used for sexual assault allegations. But for a second, imagine a creative criminal who can exploit this data for social engineering, hence can intelligently interact with this VIP and eventually access one of his digital assets. It could be through his mobile phone, his laptop, etc. Then imagine the size and the impact of the attack that could be generated. And the criminals today are very creative. So collecting all these events, all these signals, and converting it into an event is super important.
Yeah, and as you and I have discussed many times, that on the human layer is so often the soft spot for organizations today. Whether this types of doxing or exposed information then leads to BEC scams, phishing attacks, or other compromises. And of course, this is becoming even more prominent if we think about executive protection and VIP protection, if you will, in using this as a means to expose and compromise these types of individuals.
Absolutely. So here we can find another example of a major attack over a subsidiary of a multinational company in the aerospace industry. A major part of their data were encrypted by the Logbit ransomware, whoever knows about that, just a couple of weeks ago. I think the event occurred around the beginning of December. So the same ransomware can immediately, if not already, impact the mother company. This is exactly the phenomena of the supply chain. So you are connected to a company that you just bought, but actually this company is being compromised and you don't know about it. So monitoring all the time, all your subsidiaries, all your supply chains, your domains, your digital assets can help effectively find the next event. Here is another point of risk, PII. Tokopedia might not be known to all of us, but it's similar to AliExpress. It's a large Indonesian e-commerce organization that was breached. I think it has like 5,000 employees. 91 million accounts were breached. So even though it's Indonesian, the accounts, as we all know, might be related to US citizens, and actually they're pretty global. All of us buy in AliExpress, I think, and even belong to the VIPs or even their siblings. Imagine how a criminal mastermind can use this data in order to social engineer, then attack relevant surfaces. This data breach is being sold in Empire Market, a known dark web marketplace. This breach was exposed by Shiny Hunter, which is a rising star in the data breach in 2020.
And, Liran, if you take this back to the Fortune 100 report that we were talking about earlier, and, top executives related to the SolarWinds data as well about the employees that had exposed emails and passwords and data breaches. This is where this information comes from. It's sold on the dark web quite regularly, open web. Eventually, this data kind of makes its rounds. But I mean, just this one breach alone, as you mentioned, 91 million individuals exposed. That data, and some of this data varies in what it has: emails, personal information, passwords. But then this is the information that's then turned around and used in phishing, spear phishing attacks. Combined with other data sets online, if it's the right individuals, for more targeted based attacks, all for the low price of $5,000. And you can see, right, the multitude, or you can imagine the multitude of companies that this data then exposes, if you think of like a chain of compromises.
I can tell you that I bump into such kind of mega leak. Also, I think something like once a month, even more.
Yeah.
And I must tell you, looking on 2021, there are some that claim that data breaches is passé and, already obsolete. I don't think so. They have a very good incentive to compromise different types of accounts. It will be much more sophisticated. It will go to places that are the soft points. It could be insurance company, multiple e-commerce that don't have really good cyber protection. And eventually, the more important question is how the data will be used and reused and reused. The same data can lie and circulate in the dark web for years and can be reused many times. Because the basic idea of the human layer that we usually use 20 different accounts but with a single password, and usually it's easy. It's either the birth date compromised with something else. So it's super important to know about these breaches, to be aware of the data that was breached, and eventually convert it to the relevant alert.
And Liran, it brings to mind something else related to this breach conversation, and it's something that we talk about and we promote quite often, which is, we discuss password reuse quite a bit, but we don't often talk about email reuse.
Oh, yeah.
We're bombarded by communication. Sometimes it is very difficult to detect sophisticated social engineering attacks, even on the phishing side, much less the spear phishing side. I think it's very important to discuss here siloing communications and your digital activities to different email accounts, so it becomes easier in the decision-making process when emails are coming in, whether or not you should click something, whether or not something sniffs to be legitimate or illegitimate. We always talk about having an individual should have at least 3 personal email accounts in order to silo the one throwaway email where you use to sign up for a variety of different things that are one-offs. You've got a second email account that's specific to your social media, your online forums, your Facebooks and Twitters and Discord type of accounts, and then a third more personal account that you use for personal communications and financial transactions. And then, of course, to make sure, really sure that you're using your business account for business purposes only, going back to that Fortune 100 statistic that 23%, I think it was, Fortune 100 top executives are using business accounts for signing up for personal social media. And they're using it for a lot of others too. I mean, we verify email accounts to other online platforms as well, and they're using it for a lot more than social media, and that just shouldn't happen today.
And according to this business email compromise that you just mentioned, I must tell you that it's very interesting to me to understand how many of those that use the same business email use the same password that they use for their own personal account in the organization. And I'm sure here the correlation, you must agree with me, is very high.
Very high, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So here, because humans are currently the top or one of the weakest links, for organizations, it's important that we have continuous and more advanced training and awareness programs, capabilities that continually evolve as the threats evolve, and that are personalized and not overly generic. We at PyQ here have developed a training and awareness program that takes this collected PII information that we're using as risk exposures, and providing that information, the risk exposure information, the risk factor information to the individuals so they can identify which pieces that they need to correct, or whether or not that information is okay to be out there. But then we take that PII and we tailor spear phishing simulations for each individual user. I think that's important, especially important for key employees and top executives that are the ones most at risk of being targeted for attacks. We talk about there's 2 phases to social engineering. There's the reconnaissance and there's the targeting phase. And the reason we have a separation between phishing, even sophisticated phishing, and spear phishing is because reconnaissance takes time.
Yes.
What we here at PyQ have done is we've taken the information that we're getting through feeds such as WebHose, and we're automating the reconnaissance phase, which then allows us to automate the targeting phase as well. And that's, I think, quite a scary thing to talk about. But that is, where things are advancing. So we need to be able to be current and maybe even ahead of where these threats are evolving to.
So all these threats, as you said, are being discussed very thoroughly or being traded in the dark and deep web. It's just a matter of continuously monitoring and collecting this data and eventually translate it into this wonderful training program. So eventually, when you want to be trained and be safe, you need to be aware of the latest techniques, the latest attack surface, because I'm saying it again and again and again, the criminals are very, very creative. They always find the next backdoor or the next way in order to hop in. In most of the cases, as you mentioned, it's around phishing and very good high quality social engineering. Only the last a few days ago, I bumped into the AnyDesk, the famous AnyDesk application that allows you to remotely access a computer that was using a Google advertisement phishing. I mean, I saw I was looking for AnyDesk to help one of my colleagues and just typed it in Google, and I just reached to the first link, which was anydesk.work, and it was like an advertisements of Google. It was crazy. It looks exactly like the AnyDesk day-to-day page, which I usually use. And then when I downloaded it, the antivirus started to feel that it's something different and gave me some warnings about malicious code, etc. So it was really amazing, and it's designed fantastically, so you'll not notice any change, as most of the users, and believe me, I'm technical, so it took me a few iterations in order to find out that this is actually a scam page. So I'm just saying again, to have a continuous and up-to-date information can effectively help to provide the latest threats, knowledge, and awareness of the techniques used. WebOS actually can provide such kind of information.
So we're near the end of our presentation. We just want to make sure we cover some key takeaways, right? I mean, comprehensive risk analysis, it's a hard problem. It's a hard challenge. As we've talked about, we have risks that expand outside traditional channels that are difficult to get our arms around. We have third-party vulnerabilities, which greatly extends the chain of compromise. We need to have a more holistic view of organizational risk, which means we need to include more data sources. We need to train our analysts in order to be able to view patterns across those data sources and not just be focused on individual artifacts of compromise. And this needs to be continuous and iterative. I mean, I talk about AI is wonderful, machine learning is wonderful, and it can really advance a lot of our capabilities here. But in some cases, nothing replaces a very good and experienced analyst with the right tools. Golden threads are oftentimes very difficult to come by. But if you put the right tools in the hands of good analysts, typically good things are going to come out of it.
Absolutely. And I must say again, there are thousands or tens of thousands of signals around the dark and deep networks. It's just a matter of focus. Find the right relevant words, collect these signals, convert them into an event. And actually, the monitoring should continuously continue pre the event and post the events, because there are some details, like the examples that I showed before, that can provide you more details and focus on the exact attack vector that happened. So it requires continuous monitoring in order to do high quality risk monitor assessments like the Risk HQ.
Perfect. Okay, guys, we are looking. It looks like there have been a couple questions that have been submitted. Okay, this one I think makes sense for Liron. What type of content do you often come across in your dark web coverage?
So, Alana, the content that we bump and see in our dark networks is, a variety of illicit topics. It could range from different hacking techniques or trading of different tools. Financial frauds are very popular. Carding frauds, the most popular ones, I think. There is tons of PII, personal identifiable information, and NPI that is being exposed every day. It could be around pay sites or even shared like a snippet in different forums, or it could be like a database, large files with as I just showed you the Tokopedia breach, which was 91 millions emails that were compromised.
No doubt. Okay, great answer. Let's look at this one. I think, Aaron, this is directed at you, I think, around the HQ product or the spear phishing product. They didn't really identify one or the other, but they're asking, are you GDPR and California Privacy Protection Act compliant?
We are, we've done our rounds with the lawyers and of course with inside our internal business processes to make sure that we have the mechanisms in place to remove information when requested, and also to be very cognizant of any of the data that we collect is all or open source data. It's all publicly available data, and as I mentioned, have the mechanisms to remove when requested. We are GDPR and CPAA compliant.
Good stuff. Okay, this one also makes sense for you, Aaron. What is the most heavily weighted PII exposures that drives more risk for organizations, either internally or through partnerships?
Yeah, so that's a multi-layered answer. I mean, number one, we always talk about, there's 3 steps to a social engineering based attack or a human based compromise. Number one, you need to know that an individual is tied to a specific organization. So, listing things like job title and place of employment, that's oftentimes that's your first tick, your first risk marker. But in many cases, we find that's something that's unavoidable to list, because individual brand and corporate brand have become so much tied together, and we understand that. So we're not asking everybody, for example, just make sure you remove all PII as much as possible, delete all social media accounts and just get off the internet. It's a matter of understanding the complexities of if you are associated with an organization, what other pieces of information make you exposed? So, for example, what position you have, who you're employed by, or organization you're tied to. Can I find easily identify means of communication, email addresses, personal email addresses? And then the third one is context. That's especially from a targeted spear phishing attack. Being able to identify the things that a person's interested in, the relationships that are key to them, that I might be able to spoof or simulate, all of those. So it's a combined factor, actually.
Interesting. Okay, we have kind of 2 very similar questions. I think one was more directed at Liran at Webhose, and then the other one I think was more for Aaron. And so the combined question here is, for Aaron, and I guess you could answer first, can you set alerts for risk markers being monitored?
Yes, absolutely. So, once you get through and you identify not only specific artifacts, but also, as we've been talking about, patterns. So you might have a threshold of activity. Every company's risk posture is different. A British Petroleum's risk posture is different than, a medium to small business. Some companies are more exposed than others, and they operate. They figured out how to operate at that level. So being able to set sentiment marker alerts, being able to set pattern marker alerts, volume of communications or conversations, as well as specific artifacts. So whether or not a specific keyword or phrase is mentioned, or specific individuals that you understand are, might be tied adversarially to your organization, become more active. So absolutely.
So I would like to add here something about the alert. So eventually, when we look on the alert, it's a composition of many types of keywords divided into different categories. And in most of the cases, there is an ontology around it. So eventually, you have multiple entities that are correlated in the first hop or even the second hop to the same target, much like a business relations between the mother company and its subsidiaries. So once you take all of that, let's call it a net of words, and eventually throw it into the monitor system, then you start to find relevant signals. Now, the beauty here is that if you know to keep the ontology, the correlations between the different keywords, and you get the relevant signal and match it to the right place, then you can easily calculate the risk and understand the impact on the eventually the target company. So definitely. Yeah.
So I guess that answers the question. How do we know in advance? And you just kind of laid that out for us. So
Yeah, you see.
perfect. See, there you go. Okay, Liran, how do you handle the ever-changing arena of dark web sources? How do you keep up with kind of the latest hotspots?
So it's similar to what I said in the beginning in slide, I think number 4. It was around the collection platform. The key essence here is to have a very good and robust discovery. As you said, the arena is changing all the time. Criminals are migrating between different networks. Even the sites are being changed all the time. So you need to have a very robust discovery to find the new sources. It could be in various ways, which I cannot disclose here. But eventually, if you have such kind of engine, and as you can understand, part of it is automated and part of it is based on human analysts that actually cover it, then you can have a very good basis for the changing arena. The next step is to have a very robust and continuous extraction of data, which here we can find a lot of challenges through the collection itself, whether it will be from a deep and closed market or a deep closed forum, that there you have different challenges like an IP blocking or session expiration or human behavior analysis that the admin are using. So if you take all these accounts and continuously monitoring the changes, then it will work perfectly. One thing that I can expose here is that eventually the next links to the relevant sources sometimes lies between the lines, meaning that if you have a discussion or a forum where you have a thread of discussion of a ransomware, in most of the cases, the relevant criminals, it could be a business group or something else, will provide links to the next forum or the next account that they are using. So this is one of the techniques to increase the span of the discovery.
Okay, so using the right tools is really important.
Super important, yeah.
Okay, so I guess both of you can each kind of take a turn. We'll start with Aaron on this question because it's pretty broad. So what is the likelihood if we or a partner has already had a breach, and it's not specified how recent or whatnot, but what is the likelihood if we or a partner had already had a breach, it will actually happen again?
Yeah, that's a difficult thing to tell.
And
But
you can say 50%, and it will be okay.
sure, right. I'll just throw out a number. No, it's difficult to tell. But as we kind of covered in the presentation, being able to monitor, especially after a breach, conversations, chatter, IOCs that were previously part of the first breach, individuals that might have been involved, specific channels that were involved. Those are going to provide some of your best indicators. I don't know what you think, Laurent.
So, speaking about the next breach now, I saw many of the cases, like you see a serial entrepreneur. So I saw many serials of such kind of cases. To say for sure, yeah, I must tell you that the criminals are also lazy. Eventually, if you find a good backdoor to a domain, and this eventually domain does not, or let's say the organization does not handle or protect his organization, then for sure it will happen again. In many of the cases, you have automated tools that try to ping different ports and IPs. So eventually you can the same event can repeat again unless it's being protected and being aware of the risk.
Very true. Very true. Well, I don't really see any more questions, guys, coming back in. Does anybody have any more closing comments, or did anybody, kind of any ideas sparked based off some of these questions you wanted to cover?
Well, I see one more I want to make sure I want to answer. There's a question that says, how are you making sure the adverts are legitimate? The example being the Apple iPhone 12, it could just be a scam or just a troll. And that's a great question, right? So we need to be able to try to filter out as much of the noise as we possibly can, try to identify, but it is a challenge, right? What's legitimate from what's maybe just noise. In this case, this is where it goes between the tools and the analysts, and being able to look at the individuals that are posting, whether or not those user IDs or monikers, aliases have been used before, if there's any legitimacy to that, if there's any trending in conversations. I don't know what you think about that, Liran, but I think, right, that's where part of the investigation comes in.
Yeah, actually, I agree. Yeah, I don't have anything else to add here.
Well, good stuff. So I think that concludes our content for the day, guys. We and gals, we appreciate everybody joining us, and we will make sure to get everybody. There's already been some requests here to get the recording out to you guys. I'm sure it's a busy time, kind of based on our audience here and everything going on. And stay safe out there, and we'll get you guys access to the call. And we appreciate you guys joining us today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.